Welcome to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, the newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/running on ice. Today, we welcome Crystal Haynes, Senior Director, International 3PL Business Development at ICS. Thank you so much for joining us today, Crystal.
Thank you.
I'm excited for today. One of the other shows that I work on here focuses on the 3PL segment. So I like kind of merging everything together and really just kind of making that best of both worlds. Before we get too far into that, though, let's get some background on you and how you got started at ICS.
Awesome. Thank you. So hello again, Crystal, Senior Director of ICS Business Development International 3PL. Although you said my title much better than I did, I probably should have stuck with that. My mission is to create healthier futures through bringing innovative medicines to market, particularly cell and gene therapies. I have over 14 years of experience in pharmaceutical business development and healthcare. And I actually have a nursing background, so I'm able to leverage that to look at strategic imperatives differently and some of the operational oversight for cold chain therapies slightly different as we develop our business with a focus on supporting manufacturers on their commercial journey, launching groundbreaking therapies.
I really like that. I feel like that nursing background really kind of lends yourself to be like, no, actually, it does matter when something falls outside of its temperature. And it does matter if something is slightly off because the end product is actually going to negatively impact somebody. So, kind of on that, the rise in like these kind of customizable gene therapies has been absolutely fantastic. I mean, as much as it is kind of a pain in the butt to ship and get all the goods to where people need it to be, I love that there is kind of this rise of, more customized medicine that's actually able to help people more effectively and efficiently, and ultimately at the end of the day save lives because that's just like a really cool thing that you get to be like a part of. So, but there has been a huge demand in the rise for temperature controlled logistics for this very specific thing. Why do you think that kind of there is that drive coming in? But then also, is it just because the demand for the industry is happening and that everyone's saying, hey, we can ship this stuff so we can start making these more customized and intricate therapies? Or do you think it's just kind of like these therapies are existing and the two industries are kind of going hand in hand together?
Yeah, I think it's to your latter point, exactly that. It's a mix. It's a mix of both. So, to your point, it's the growing percentage of products that are being developed require this cold chain storage and handling. And research actually shows medicines requiring cold chain storage account for 35% of the pharmaceutical market. That's up from 26% in 2017. So under 10 years, 10% increase in these cold chain therapies. And that's driven by the growth in the complexity of therapies, both orphan or rare therapies, highly sensitive pharmaceuticals like cell and gene therapies. And they're offering a tremendous potential for life saving that benefits patients worldwide. So that's really what the unique requirements are logistically. For example, the cell and gene therapies, the biological materials like living cells or genetically modified viruses are engineered in a certain way in order for it to remain viable. It has to remain within a very narrow temperature and time framework. And so to ensure the therapeutic potential and the integrity of these complex cell and gene therapies, it has to be maintained at a certain temperature throughout the entire supply chain, from manufacturing all the way to the patient's bedside. And there's sometimes multiple stops in between there. And any exposure to temperatures outside of the specific range really threatens that product's viability, and it could result in wastage, lost revenue, or even delayed patient access. So our industry, or the industry's really responded well, in part through investments in cold chain storage and transport. I think our company in particular has really invested in cryogenic infrastructure, I think in the last 6 to 7 years. It's really been 10 years where we've seen technology solutions, real time temperature monitoring, and things that are really enabling a secure and reliable distribution of the medicines.
I think that's something that's really kind of fascinating specifically about the pharmaceutical supply chain is that it's more than just like, because if you get an e-commerce shipment and you get a pair of jeans, it doesn't matter if it gets to be 80 degrees in the middle of the Arizona desert. By the time it gets to you, it's still gonna be a pair of jeans. It doesn't matter if it froze, it doesn't matter if it got too hot. You can still use it. There's no negative impacts. But then when you come to the temperature controlled side of things, we've had this analogy a lot of, if you get a birthday cake and maybe it's an ice cream cake or it falls out of temperature, okay, you can still probably eat it, but it's not very good. And like the overall taste quality of it is not there. But that's in the food supply chain and you have some of those delicate things there. But when you really step into the pharmaceutical lane, that margin for error is so small. You have to be like so perfect and so within it that like, truly, because if your strawberries fall out of temperature, you can still eat them. 'Em, they're just gonna go bad quicker, but you could like, they are still you won't die if you have a strawberry that has fallen outside of its temperature. But also with the pharmaceutical side, it's not just, "Oh, it needs to stay at this temperature." There are some that, they need to stay at maybe -50 degrees Celsius, but they can't stay in that for more than a certain amount of time because otherwise you'll start degrading again on the other side. And so I think it's so fascinating that it's so precise on so many different levels. It's more than just, oh yeah, it needs to stay ultra cold. No, it needs to stay ultra cold and it can't be ultra cold for too long. And that's one of the things that I think is just the most fascinating about it.
Yeah, I agree. I like your analogy of like the food or some of the commodity items that we see shipping all the time. These therapies are very different and the margin for error is very, very tight. So I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's nice because 'cause they're, like you said, it's medicine. So if it does fall out of temperature, it's not like, "Oh, I'm just gonna have to buy a different thing of strawberries." It's like, "No, this has to be completely redone," and it could potentially, like, drastically negatively impact someone's life.
Yeah.
But something you got touched on earlier is that you guys are really investing in that cryogenic storage. Kind of what made you guys go, this is where we wanna devote our time, energy, money, and resources? Because it is a little bit more challenging than just having like an ultra cold freezer walk-in.
Yeah. So the cryogenic storage presents a lot of unique challenges, and there are a lot of hurdles with handling these cell and gene therapies. And for us, we really believe in creating healthier futures for everyone, whether it's life saving, life extending. And so, really coming out of COVID, I think everyone started to see the -90, -60 degree temperatures, something that the entire network can handle. These -150 degrees Celsius therapy is extremely low. It requires a lot of special equipment to even be able to handle it. The tanks themselves or the units that they sit in, or the people that work in the area itself, they have to be highly trained. And so, specifically for cell and gene therapies, it is one of the fastest growing areas. There's two different types of therapies you will hear in the cell space. One of those is allogeneic cell therapies. And there was an IQVIA study that recently published around 50% of the phase 1 cell therapy trials are allogeneic. And that's really where you see a lot of 3PL and distributor companies stepping up and investing in cryogenic storage to support these therapies. So allogeneic cell therapies are really referred to as off the shelf. And it can be effectively and efficiently manufactured in large batches. And as a result, the approach offers the potential to accelerate time to treatment or even broaden access to these innovative therapies globally. The donor cells are collected, and the donor, it doesn't have to be specific to you or specific to myself in order for us to be treated. I could take your cells or you could take my cells. But essentially what happens is the cells are collected and transported to a manufacturing site for modification, filling, and finishing before being shipped to a GMP compliant storage facility. So GMP is good manufacturing practice where products can be kept in a safe haven, at its specified temperature condition, and then delivered on time or just in time is really what we would say. The second cell therapy line is autologous cells. And although we're seeing this space evolve, these are really fresh cells, and the shelf life is about 12 hours to 96 hours before they degrade. So you don't really see a high temperature need. You see a high need for transport in that space. Historically, I think in the last year, we've seen autologous therapy start to shift out of one treatment, fresh delivery of the cells into flash freezing. And it's an option that's allowing manufacturers to extend the shelf life of the cells. And so they're able to cryogenically store or preserve the cells, doing different types of techniques. And then really it's on some of the logistics providers to help them with maintaining the negative 150-degree Celsius environment. And then when it comes to the critical role of being able to advance that therapy to the patient, understanding labeling, some of the chain of custody, chain of identity, unique patient ID matching or lot specific matching. Those are other things that logistically, the systems, the software, how it talks into maybe the equipment that the cells are stored in is really advancing in this space to help us become more efficient. I think 5 years ago, if we were having this conversation, I would be talking about manually picking out of ultra low units or cryogenic tanks. Now there's automated tanks that allow for less handling, really limiting the product exposure, allowing you to pick the right item that needs to go directly to that patient. So environments are changing, precision is changing, and it's really making some of the 3PL logistics partners more reliable and trusted with these type of products.
It really is kind of fascinating to see, like you said, 5 years ago, this conversation would be completely different. I'm curious as to, what this conversation looks like in another 5 years. Because I feel like 'cause I also like cold chain's having its moment. It's having its huge technological revolution. It's kind of getting all the resources and structure and support that it's always kind of needed. And I'm very happy for it because it's making things faster, more efficient, and wonderful. And I just like that part of it. But jumping back to something else that you said, there were these two different like main categories of cell therapies, if you will. Which one do you think is more common? Like, is the allogenic becoming more problem or not problem? Is the allogenic becoming more common and something that people are adopting more, or is it kind of on the autologous? Autologous? Is that I think I probably butchered that, but which one do you think is kind of growing faster, or are they both kind of growing at the same speed?
Yeah, so you're saying it great. So I do think we're seeing an uptick in the allogeneic cells. There's slightly less complexity as far as being tagged specifically to a patient or having to be routed back to a patient within a certain amount of hours, where in the autologous space, you really only have a day, maybe 2 days to get those cells back into the patient after they've been manufactured. On the allogeneic side, there's a lot more science. And this is where you see, especially in the US, a lot of patient advocates standing up for the science around allogeneic cells. A lot of the patients that you see right now are really advocating for the systems and the manufacturers and the science behind the allogeneic. It is very costly. You know, when you think about just storage alone, the tanks, the doers that they ship in, the people that handle them, that's a lot of work. And it's focused around making sure we're not seeing any deviations from the temperature conditions, continuously monitoring that. And so upstream and downstream, there's a lot of components that really make these therapies unique. And that's why the allogeneic will continue to rise. I definitely think in the next 5 years, it'll probably double. With the amount of clinical trials I mentioned that are currently in flux, as long as we continue to see these therapies saving lives, I really think we're going to continue to see approvals and we're going to continue to see these type of therapies on the market grow.
I absolutely love that. I was just curious as to like which one was gonna rise up to be the champion, and turns out the answer's already there. It's gonna be a good time, and I like that because you guys are kind of on the forefront there. But when it comes back to that, you guys have really doubled down on this cryogenic investment, and you guys are like all the way in on it. That has to be infinitely harder to maintain that cryogenic environment compared to just like an ultra cold freezer or just a cold storage warehouse. How do you guys even kind of go through making sure that, because it's like it's not just, oh, my frozen warehouse failed, it's probably fine. It's like, no, all of this product is destroyed. We have to basically like completely, I'm assuming, start over. How do you guys kind of maintain that temperature, and to make sure that you kind of have everything that you need, and then maybe some fail safes? How do you even begin to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The maintenance of the cryogenic environment necessitates a very specialized infrastructure, equipment, and expertise. I'll reference one point that you just made as far as, what happens if the power goes out. There's business continuity practices, redundancy practices. We have more than one site for these therapies. And it's not your traditional warehouse, right? Where I'm sure, I'm assuming a majority or knowing a majority of this audience has seen a distribution site or a warehouse, and there's racks and there's storage, and it's in the controlled room temperature or refrigerator. This specialized storage is tucked away on a side of the warehouse where there's not forklift traffic, right? There's not pallets that are getting pushed around and lots of cold chain boxes coming in and out. It's an infrastructure that has numerous backup generators. It has cameras. It has, these therapies are not cheap. There's several therapies on the market, a majority of them that are hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't think there's any therapy that's approved that isn't in the six-figure range, to be honest. So when you think about that, it's walled off. The folks that are bringing in the therapies, whoever the courier might be, whether it's a white glove courier or a courier that is well known in the market, essentially they can't just get into the building. There's about 10 to 12 individuals that can work in the workspace, and they have to sign in and out. It's badge restricted. When it comes to temperature monitoring and controls, a majority of these warehouses aren't operating set 24/7. So, it has to have that continuous update and detecting if there's anything happening within the site, within the units that these therapies are sitting in. And it's got multiple alarms, right, to make sure nothing happens. So, knock on wood, nothing has happened at ICS. We've been great, right? Even just natural disasters, right? Hurricanes, fires, like we're living in that type of world right now. And so promptly being able to detect and react to this is a key component within the site. I mentioned transportation really quickly, just meaning that you might have a courier that can get in and out of specific 3PL sites. Our site is not one of them unless it's a Syncora, which is our company, unless it's one of our own couriers coming in to get these therapies. The transport protocols shield the therapy, right? So they're coming in. ICS has already had 3 individuals pack out the therapy. No one shipment only gets one person that ships that therapy. There's the warehouse associate that's packing it. There's a risk and integration person that's, checking all the boxes and signing off on any type of regulation or protocols. And then the trained individual that's a QA or what we would call a quality associate is doing the batch release of the product, right? And so as the cryogenic material or ultra cold material is moving out of our chain supply, we're guaranteeing we were the last person that touched it. We scanned it in. Another big component is track and trace. You might hear it as DSCSA or serialization requirements. And so we're safely and securely saying we've tagged this product, we've packed it out according to the protocol, and it's going to this site. Lastly, I think the fifth big thing, I think I said five. If I didn't, I'm going to say five, uh, is order management and orchestration platforms. And it's very important for these cold chain therapies once they leave its safe haven. So once it leaves us, it's going to an institution. It's not always going to a cell lab that has the capability or the capacity to do the cold chain storage. And so it has to be real time. It has to be orchestrated through specific hubs that make sure that even the patient is going to arrive around the same time the product's arriving. Um, so, having a provider that can orchestrate all of those things all the way to the patient is extremely important. And as we look ahead at the future of these cell and gene therapies, you know, like I said, 5 years ago, we might have been shipping one or two a week. We're up to, almost 10 of these type of therapies a week. That's going to double and triple. And so the logistics that's shaping our future is making sure that all the way to that final mile, it's arriving on the right time, because that they only get a certain window to thaw these therapies and to be able to administer them.
That is, I think that might be the very definition of complex, most moving parts possible. Just because that is a lot to keep track of and a lot to kind of focus on. I don't like props to y'all because that's a lot. That's a lot. So when it comes to that's like security check after redundancy, like, but also if it's going to continue to grow, if you have these amazing kind of fail safes in place now, all you have to do is as you add, maybe if you grow up to 20 loads a week, which seems not like a unachievable thing. You kind of already have the system in place. You just kind of say, okay, well, we just need to add a little bit more people or maybe like grow out a little bit more space. But I do like the fact that you guys kind of tuck it away so that way there's zero chance of like Joe on a forklift accidentally taking a wrong turn and like ending up in cryogenic, which I'm not sure how that would happen normally. But you guys really just shut it down and said there's not going to accidentally be you walking into this
Mhm.
area.
Yep, exactly.
So we have time for probably one more question before we get to our favorite question of the day. So when we're kind of looking ahead, what trends do you see kind of coming to this space, and kind of how you see the industry kind of coming to support these pharmaceuticals as well?
I think the 3PL industry will play an increasingly important role in the chain supply of seeing these critical therapies advance and extend into other geographies. At the moment, for us, we've seen this tremendous momentum in the cell and gene sector. We're coming off of a year in which the FDA approved 9 record-breaking cell and gene therapies. Nine therapies. And the fact that Cencora or ICS is partnering with 4 of those in the next quarter to launch those therapies in the US. And then the next step for them in the partnership is, okay, we've leveraged you helping us build this in the US. We're ready to take it to Europe, or we're ready to take it into this geography. And so looking ahead at the number of cell and gene therapies that are sitting in clinical development and looking ahead to say, what do we have built today to make sure that there's space, right? If we need a specific section of our warehouse, can we extend that? Do we need another site? And then bringing that heightened awareness of this demand, the patients with the same critical disease and illnesses in the US, they are in other markets. And so these companies want to expand, and some of the infrastructure and the technologies are slightly different, right? Different types of support that is critical for these products worldwide. So, that's an important factor for us. We're already looking at our long range plan. We're looking at our operational plans, and we're saying, how do we staff up for this? How do we invest in more space for this? What technology will solve the problems that we're seeing today? And how do we strategically operate around the good manufacturing practice and depots worldwide? I think a great thing that we've recently done, so ICS as a 3PL has over 1 million square feet in infrastructure, but our courier service within Syncora has another 1.2 million square feet of infrastructure. And so we've put liquid nitrogen filling stations at these hubs worldwide, so we can stop with the cryogenic material and put more LN2 in it, or more liquid nitrogen. If it's ultra low and it has dry ice, or it needs specific panels changed, we can stop at one of those hubs. There's several of them. And it's a value-added service that's effectively migrating the risk of temperature fluctuations, and minimizing any type of transport issues to the final mile. And we're doing this now worldwide. We've seen a couple things, right, that we've had to divert the product, and then keep it within temperature range. Maybe sometimes it's as small as the patient couldn't get to the site on time and they need an extra day of travel. So being able to divert it to another site and say, okay, we have a depot, we can put more liquid nitrogen, and we can get this therapy to the patient, is very important. So I think in summary, right, in conclusion, because I think you said this is my last question, it's that integrated model, right, of you have logistic hubs. It can't just be one site. You have a strong 3PL that not only provides this best-in-class storage and distribution capability, but there's these value-added services, and it really underpins a rigorous quality and regulatory standard that these manufacturers need for the complex therapies. And it's a new network, right? So we're trying to strive to stay best in class. We're trying to strive to solve problems ahead of the problems. I think the latest IQVIA report also said that today these therapies are serving very small patient populations, and they are worldwide, right? But in the next 5 years, they're going to be serving much larger patient populations. So imagine if these cell and gene therapies could cure autism, or could cure back pain, or something that's a much larger patient population. You need networks that can effectively deliver to the masses now. So I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's why we're excited to partner with you on this podcast. Let's start establishing the conversation now and generating the momentum that's needed around these type therapies. It's going to take all of us. It can't just be ICS.
Yeah, it really is. And there's just with so much growth happening, it's kind of like it's more of you can't just wait for that to be approved and then suddenly be like, okay, well, we're going to need another year to build this up. It's kind of like, oh, we need to be going. And I mean, not every drug will get its approval, but to have kind of that system in place of like, okay, well, this is coming in, we can flex this amount of space until we get something open, or we get something grown. And just the many redundancies to ensure that integrity is there throughout the entire thing. I absolutely love. Speaking of other things I love, it's our last question, and we always have to end on it. And everyone that comes on the show has to answer it. And Crystal, you're not going to get out of this one. Is cereal considered a soup?
Can I answer your question with a question?
Absolutely. You can answer it however you want. There's no laws here.
Do you put the milk in before the cereal?
Well, first of all, I don't, because I'm not a monster. Second of all, I'm not a big milk and cereal person. I prefer to eat my cereal dry like a monster. But when I do put milk and cereal together, it's cereal and then milk, because I don't like a lot of extra milk at the end, because I think drinking this milk after you've eaten a bowl of cereal is the most disgusting thing that someone can do.
That's fair. That's fair.
Mhm.
I had to train my husband. You put the cereal in first and then the milk.
I'm
So
sorry,
I
he
would
put
say
the milk in first?
yeah, he put the milk in first and then the cereal on top. I'm like that. Then I would say that's soup.
Yeah.
You're adding.
You're adding like chunks to the milk soup,
Yeah.
which is disgusting. That just came out of my mouth.
Right, which is what most people do with soup. So no, cereal goes first. And then I thought, when you asked me that question, as long as it's not soggy, it's not soup. So it has to be crunchy, which goes to your dried cereal
Yeah.
approach.
Awesome. I like it. You are on the correct line of thinking. Unlike thank goodness you put your husband on the right path because that could have been dangerous times.
Yeah. Took me 17 years, but we got it with my youngest.
All right. So if someone has a justifiable reason for putting the milk before the cereal, or if they have questions about cryogenic freezer storage or anything that we've talked about today, where can they find you outside the show?
I will be at Asymbia, which is actually in May. And there's also a great Cell and Gene forum that's coming up. It's actually virtual in the summer. And then I actually reside in Columbus, Ohio, which is close to one of our sites. And I travel worldwide. So I can come to you or you can come to us and visit. We love to host cell and gene manufacturers, right? It's important to see where these therapies would essentially be taken care of. It's like our baby, right? Especially for these manufacturers that are making this. So come see how we'll protect your baby. And thanks for having me. You're a great host. I appreciate you.
Anytime. Thank you so much for joining us today. And, the ICS daycare for your gene therapy babies is all ready for you. You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on FreightWaves TV, YouTube, or anywhere else you get your podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.